The candlelight of the ballroom caught the diamonds on her neck, but it couldn't warm the ice in his stare. Lady Olivia Harrington knew one truth above all. Rhys the formidable Duke of Ashworth despised her. He was the Iron Duke, a man of shadow power and crushing disdain. She was the one woman in all of London he refused to see. But what no one knew, not even Olivia, was that the man she mistook for her cruelest critic was the only one watching her back. And in a world of glittering lies, the person who smiles the brightest is often the one holding the sharpest knife. "You must not pull at that seam, Olivia. It is the only thing holding the lace in place." Lady Harrington's voice was as taut as the thread itself. Olivia dropped her hand from the neckline of her pale blue silk gown. It was a beautiful dress, or at least it had been 3 seasons ago when it belonged to her mother. Now, skillfully retrimmed and altered, it was her only hope. "My apologies, Mamma," Olivia murmured, turning back to the mirror in her small bedchamber. The glass was old, its silvering spider-webbed at the edges. The reflection it offered was of a young woman with a sharp, intelligent face, eyes that were a shade too serious, and a gown that was trying just a little too hard. "This night is everything." Lady Harrington continued, her hands fluttering nervously. "Lord Bromley will be there. He is stable. He is 60, Mamma, and smells of mothballs and port," Olivia replied, a spark of her true self flashing through. "He is unmarried." Her mother snapped her composure, cracking. "And we—" She gestured around the room, where the threadbare rug and peeling wallpaper spoke their own story, are not. Olivia's levity vanished, replaced by the familiar cold stone of anxiety in her stomach. Her father, Lord Harrington, was a man of warmth, kindness, and catastrophic financial sense. His latest venture, some promising investment in the East Indies, had thus far yielded only a new crop of worry lines on his face. Tonight at the hallowed Almack's assembly rooms, Olivia was not a debutante. She was a sacrifice offered up to save their family from a ruin that was already nipping at their heels. The assembly rooms were as always suffocating. The air was thick with the scent of wilting roses, unlit beeswax, and the perfume of desperate mothers. It was, Olivia thought, the most exclusive and terrifying marketplace in the world. She had just managed to escape the damp-handed Lord Bromley, pleading a need for lemonade when she saw him. Rhys, the Duke of Ashworth, he was not mingling. He was a patron of this establishment, and he stood near the grand entrance like a dark, forbidding sentinel. He was a man carved from shadow and granite, his black cutaway coat and stark white cravat making him seem more severe than any other man in the room. He was the Iron Duke, a title earned for his unbending will in Parliament, and his rumoured to be non-existent heart in matters of society. As she watched Lord Farringdon, a popular young rake tried to enter. He was 2 minutes past the 11 o'clock deadline. "Your Grace," Farringdon pleaded, charmingly drunk, "surely you can let it slide for me." The Duke did not even turn. He spoke to the door warden, his voice a low, clear rumble that cut through the orchestral swell. "The rules are the rules, Mr. Hatcher. See that they are enforced." Farringdon, red-faced and furious, was denied. The most powerful men in the room watching the exchange all seemed to shrink a little. That was the Duke of Ashworth, a man of absolute, unfeeling order. Olivia had been studiously avoiding him for 3 weeks, ever since their first and only near interaction. Tonight she was not so lucky. Finding herself cornered by a group of younger sons, she had been drawn into a debate on the Corn Laws. Forgetting herself, she had become animated, her wit sharp, and her points clear. "But if you subsidize the landowner," she argued, You do not merely protect him, you impoverish the city worker. It is a false economy, a tax on the poor to feed the rich." She was so engrossed, she didn't notice the circle of listeners growing quiet. She didn't notice the chill that settled over them. She only noticed when one of the young men, Mr. Davies, suddenly stammered, My apologies, Lady Olivia. I see the Duke is watching." Olivia's blood ran cold. She turned. He was 20 feet away in conversation with the Earl of Stanhope. But his dark, unblinking eyes were locked on her. He had heard her. He had watched her, a woman, debating. He murmured something to Stanhope. The Earl, a portly man, barked a sudden surprised laugh. Looked at Olivia, and then just as quickly looked away, his face suddenly beet red with embarrassment. The meaning was a physical blow. The Duke had mocked her. He had pointed her out to his friend as a source of ridicule. Look at the little blue stocking making a fool of herself. Olivia's face burned. She wanted to disappear. "A dragon, is he not?" a smooth, warm voice said at her elbow. She turned to find the bright, disarming smile of Lord Julian Croft. He was everything the Duke was not. He was sunshine and golden hair, easy charm, and a laugh that felt like an invitation. "He seems to find my very existence distasteful," Olivia whispered, her voice trembling with humiliation. "Ah, but that is his loss," Julian said, offering his arm with an easy grace. "He is a man of iron and ledgers, Lady Olivia. He prefers his world in neat black and white columns. He cannot, I fear, appreciate colour." His eyes lingered on her, implying she was the most vibrant thing in the room. "Walk with me," he urged, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Let us give the dragon something truly scandalous to watch." He was bold. He was kind. He made her feel seen, not dissected. As she took his arm, a wave of profound gratitude washed over her. He was her rescuer. As they began a slow promenade, Olivia felt that prickle on her neck again. She dared a glance. The Duke of Ashworth had not moved. His gaze was still fixed on her, but it had shifted. It was no longer just on her. It was on her and Lord Julian. The disdain was still there, sharp as ever, but it was colder, heavier, as if she had not only confirmed his poor opinion of her, but had compounded the error by aligning herself with Lord Julian. "Pay him no mind," Julian murmured, leaning closer. "His disapproval is a badge of honor, my lady. It means you are infinitely more interesting than he." He made her laugh, a genuine relieved sound. And as she laughed, she sealed her opinion. Lord Julian was her friend. The Duke was her enemy. In the intricate, cruel game of the London ton, she had just unwittingly chosen a side. The next 3 weeks were a study in contrasts, a dance between a balm and a blade. The blade was the Duke of Ashworth. The balm was Lord Julian Croft. Julian became a fixture in her life, a ray of manufactured sunshine in her family's increasingly grey world. He did not call at the proper boring hours. He seemed to accidentally appear. One morning, as she took her constitution in Hyde Park, a necessary and free pastime, he was there reining in a magnificent bay stallion. Lady Olivia. "What a marvel," he called, his smile infectious. "The city air has not dimmed your country glow. You must ride with me. My sister's mare is gentle and needs the exercise. I insist." It was impossible to refuse. And so they rode. He did not bother with the banal pleasantries of the ballroom. He asked her instead what she thought of the new Keats poem. He listened, truly listened, as she spoke of her fears for the country's farming reforms. He made her feel as if her mind, the very thing the Duke had mocked, was her most alluring quality. "You are a rare creature, Olivia," he said one day, his voice dropping to a serious, intimate tone. "You must be careful. This city, it breaks rare things." "It seems to be trying," she admitted, thinking of her mother's brittle anxiety. "It is not just the city," Julian said, guiding his horse closer. He looked around as if to ensure they weren't overheard. "It is men like Ashworth." Olivia's head snapped up. "You know him." "Know him." Julian gave a short, sad laugh. "We all know him. He is the standard by which all joy is measured and found wanting. I should not speak of it." "No, please," she urged, sensing a mystery. He sighed, the perfect picture of a man burdened by another's sins. "A friend of mine from Oxford, a good man, but he had a weakness for cards. Ashworth. He found him in a game. Instead of helping, he destroyed him. Took everything. The man's family estate, his commission, everything, for a simple debt. Ashworth showed no mercy. That is the man he is, Olivia. All iron, no heart. I would not wish his attention on my worst enemy, let alone—" He stopped, letting the implication hang. Olivia shivered. It confirmed her every suspicion. The Duke was not just cold, he was actively cruel. This image was solidified at the opera. The Harringtons, in a fit of social desperation, had taken a modest high-up box for a performance of Don Giovanni. Lord Harrington was in high spirits, the only high spirits he'd had in a month. "He's our saviour, Olivia," her father had whispered, his eyes shining with an almost manic glee. "Lord Julian. He has introduced me to a man, a Mr. Sparrow. This East Indies venture. It's not just a solution, my dear. It's a fortune. Our troubles are over." Olivia's heart swelled. Julian had not just been kind to her. He was saving her family. When Julian himself appeared in their box, a dashing figure in black and white, Olivia could have wept with gratitude. But her joy was short-lived. In the middle of the first act, the door of the grand central box, the one directly opposite, opened. The Duke of Ashworth entered. He was a late arrival, an act of supreme arrogance. He did not even glance at the stage. He stood for a long moment surveying the entire opera house, his opera glasses in hand. His gaze swept over their small, high box. It paused. Olivia shrank back, but it was too late. He had seen them. He had seen her with her family in their cheap seats. And he had seen Lord Julian, sitting with them, looking for all the world like a part of their family. The Duke's lip curled, a minuscule, barely perceptible movement that was more damning than a shout. He snapped his opera glasses shut, turned his back on the stage and their box, and presented a wall of black-coated disdain for the rest of the aria. It was a public cut, a silent declaration. "You, your family, and the man you associate with are beneath my notice." Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. Her father, oblivious in his newfound hope, noticed nothing. But Julian did. He gently placed his hand over hers. "Do not let him define you, Olivia." He whispered, his voice a warm comfort. "His world is one of power and shadows. Ours is much brighter." He made a witty observation about the lead tenor's wig, and Olivia managed a weak laugh. But the message was clear. The battle lines were not just drawn, they were fortified. On one side was Julian, full of warmth, generosity, and salvation. On the other was the Duke, a man of heartless cruelty, a man who would ruin another over a simple card game. The very next night at the Duchess of Bedford's ball, Julian proved his mettle. Lady Genevieve, a reigning belle, with a tongue like a razor, had cornered them. "Lord Julian," Genevieve drawled, her eyes sweeping over Olivia's mended silk with open contempt. "I see you are continuing your charitable work with the country bred." Olivia flinched, the insult landing like a slap. Before she could form a reply, Julian stepped slightly in front of her, a shield of perfect manners. "Lady Genevieve," he said, his smile blinding. "Your wit is as sharp as ever. I merely find that I prefer the scent of wildflowers to the, shall we say, hothouse variety." He beamed at Genevieve. "They are so much more authentic. Don't you agree?" It was a masterful, gentle defense that was also a subtle compliment to Genevieve's hothouse beauty, leaving her with nothing to say. Olivia glowed with gratitude. As Julian led her away, she glanced back, and she saw him, the Duke of Ashworth. He was partially obscured by a potted palm, watching the entire exchange. He had seen the attack. He had seen the defense. He had seen Olivia's mortification, and he had done nothing. His face was a mask of cold indifference. As she watched, he simply turned bored and walked away. He hadn't just witnessed her humiliation. He had been bored by it. The hatred in Olivia's heart solidified into a cold, hard stone. He was a cruel, empty man. Lord Julian was her only true friend. The promising investment was not just souring, it was rotting from the inside out. Lord Harrington's manic elation evaporated, replaced by a pale-faced, shaking panic. The letters from Mr. Sparrow, once so full of promise, now spoke of unforeseen complications, customs delays, and most terrifyingly, a need for immediate supplemental capital. He says the ship was beset by pirates. Lord Harrington confessed one terrible evening. His hands shaking so badly, he spilled his brandy on the threadbare study rug. "But a second ship, a guaranteed venture, can cover all losses if we double down. But I have nothing left, Olivia. The creditors, they're not just writing, they're calling." "But Lord Julian," Olivia pleaded her faith in her charming saviour, beginning to feel like a frayed rope. "He introduced you. What does he say?" "He's unavailable," her father whispered, his gaze distant. "Always with his man of business. He sends his regrets." A new, cold, dread one that had nothing to do with the Duke of Ashworth began to seep into Olivia's bones. The foundation she had built her hopes on was turning to sand. She needed to find him. She had to. She had to make him understand. The Holland House rout was the most crowded event of the season. Olivia went with one goal: find Julian. She and her mother had braved the whispers the Harringtons were out but not yet down, and Olivia left her mother, clinging to the arm of a minor viscountess, while she searched the crush. He wasn't in the ballroom. He wasn't in the card rooms. He wasn't in the supper room. A wave of panic, hot and suffocating, rose in her throat. She fled the heat and the noise, pushing through a set of French doors into the cool, dark garden. She found a secluded stone bench hidden behind a curtain of ivy, and for the first time allowed the tears of fear and frustration to fall. It was then she heard the voices, low, tense, and coming from the other side of the ivy. One voice was unknown, rough-edged, and respectful. "The father is writing bad notes, Your Grace. He's borrowing from moneylenders now. It's getting messy." Olivia froze. "Your Grace." The second voice sent a jolt of pure ice through her. It was Ashworth. "Messy is what Croft does," the Duke's voice bit out cold and precise. "He creates chaos and profits from it. What of the investment? A total fabrication, as you suspected," the rough voice Thorpe she'd heard him called replied. "The ship, the cargo, all phantom. He's bled Harrington dry. Now the girl," Olivia's heart stopped. "I told you." The Duke's voice turned to ice. "The girl is irrelevant. She is a complication. She has tied herself to him like a fool. Let her learn her lesson." "But Your Grace," Thorpe pressed Croft's intentions, "they're not just financial. He's been boasting in his cups." There was a long, dangerous pause. Olivia held her breath. "His boasting will be his undoing." The Duke said, his voice flat and utterly devoid of emotion. "The target is Croft. The Harringtons are just a tool, and tools get broken. I will not have this investigation compromised by a sentimental blue stocking. Do what you must to contain the father, but keep the girl out of it. She is a distraction. I want Croft. I don't care about the collateral. A tool to be broken. Collateral. Irrelevant." The words hit Olivia harder than a physical blow. A choked, horrified sob escaped her lips. The voices instantly stopped. A moment later, the rough-voiced man was gone, but a tall, dark shadow blotted out the moonlight from the ivy archway. The Duke of Ashworth stood there. He was not surprised to see her. He knew. "Lady Olivia," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You should not be listening in places you do not belong." She shot to her feet, her terror eclipsed by a sudden white-hot rage. You, monster. You knew my father was in trouble. You knew Julian Croft," the Duke interrupted, his voice dangerously soft, "is not the man you think he is." "And you are," she spat, laughing a broken, hysterical laugh. You're competing with him. This is a game to you. You're both trying to ruin us. He's a liar, and you're a vulture. You're letting my family be destroyed while you play your cruel games." She was babbling, incoherent with rage and betrayal. "I am irrelevant. Collateral. How dare you?" He stepped closer into the moonlight. His face was not angry. It was tired, infinitely tired. But his eyes were hard. "You understand nothing of what you speak. You see a painted screen and assume you know the entire play." "I understand what I heard," she cried. "You're right. I am a fool. I am a fool for ever thinking you were anything but a heartless, empty shell of a man." She pushed past him, her shoulder striking his chest. It was like striking a stone wall. He didn't flinch. He just stood there, a statue in the moonlight, and let her go. As she ran back to the house, tears streaming down her face, a new terrible thought pierced her panic. He had said, "The target is Croft." She had misunderstood everything. This wasn't a simple rivalry. This was a war between two powerful, evil men. And her family was the ground they were trampling into mud. And the Duke of Ashworth had just confirmed he would happily watch them bleed to death. The Duke's words, "tools get broken," proved to be a dark prophecy. The fall was not a single dramatic event. It was a slow, agonizing, and humiliating collapse. It began with the bailiffs. They did not knock politely. They pounded on the door of the Mayfair townhouse, their voices loud, their faces hard. They were rough men in rough coats, and they cared nothing for Lord Harrington's title. They carried an inventory book and began tagging everything. This pianoforte," one of them said, running a grimy hand over the keys Olivia's mother so loved. This'll fetch a decent price." Lady Harrington, seeing the man touch her most prized possession, made a small wounded sound and fainted onto the carpet. Lord Harrington, his face the colour of old parchment, simply stared, muttering about pirates and Mr. Sarrow. Olivia, her hands raw from scrubbing the grate, the last of the servants had fled their wages unpaid, could only watch frozen in a state of cold, stark terror. The world outside the house closed in. The few remaining invitations ceased. The morning at homes, once sparsely attended, were now devastatingly empty. The Thorn had turned its back with the silent, unified cruelty of a pack of wolves. Olivia learned the true meaning of the cut direct. She had been forced to go to the apothecary for a draught for her father, who had taken to his bed with a laudanum bottle. She had to walk. As she hurried down Bond Street, her head down a grand carriage passed. Lady Bedford, the Duchess, who had praised her spirit just a month prior, was inside. Their eyes met. Olivia saw the flicker of recognition, followed by a cold, deliberate stare. Lady Bedford snapped her carriage shade closed. It was a small, silent violence, and it hurt more than any word. But the final lethal blow came in the form of a small, ink-stained pamphlet. It appeared overnight, circulated in smoking rooms, and passed between ladies' maids. It was titled "The Greek Goddess of Mayfair," or "The Country Mouse and the London Fox, Olivia's Maid." The only servant who had stayed out of loyalty and who had not been paid found it in the kitchens and brought it to her, her face pale. "My lady, you must not read this." Olivia took it from her shaking hand. It was vulgar, it was anonymous, and it was devastatingly specific. It did not use names, but it spoke of a desperate young lady with a penchant for quoting the Greeks whose foolish father had lost their fortune. It detailed unchaperoned rides and private rendezvous in garden alcoves. It hinted with sickening clarity that her virtue had been the first thing her family had been willing to sell. It is whispered, Olivia read, her vision blurring, that J.C. is the current holder of the lady's affections, a high price to be sure for a filly with such a tarnished bloodline. One wonders what he will do now that her dowry has been revealed to be nothing but debt. She was not just ruined, she was defiled. This, she knew, was Julian's work. The final cowardly twist of the knife. The man she had adored, the man she had defended. He had not just abandoned her, he had actively destroyed her. He had poisoned the well, ensuring that no other man, no Lord Bromley, however odious, would ever come for her. He had made her toxic, and Julian himself, he was gone. When Olivia, in a last desperate act, had gone to his townhouse, she was not met by a butler. The house was shuttered. A "For Let" sign was nailed to the door. He had vanished, taking his lies and his charm with him. The night before their possessions were to be auctioned, her mother emerged from her room. She was dressed in her finest, albeit faded, evening gown. "We are going out, Olivia," Lady Harrington announced, her voice brittle as glass. "Mother, we can't," Olivia whispered. There's nothing left." "We are going to the Marchioness of Salisbury's ball," her mother insisted, her eyes alight with a terrifying, almost mad pride. "We must. If we are not seen, they will know it is all true. We must show them we are not beaten. We will hold our heads high. It is," she said, her voice cracking, "the last bullet we have." It was madness. It was a lamb walking into a slaughterhouse and demanding to be seen. But as Olivia looked at her mother's desperate, broken, proud face, she knew they had no choice. She went to her wardrobe and pulled out the pale blue, thrice-mended silk. She was, she thought, dressing for her own funeral. The ballroom at Salisbury House was a blaze of light, a living sea of diamond silks and suffocating self-importance. To Olivia it looked like a circle of hell, populated by elegantly dressed demons. The moment the Harrington family was announced, the Lord and Lady Harrington and the Lady Olivia Harrington, a hush fell over the assembly. It was not a respectful silence. It was a cold, predatory vacuum. The music itself seemed to falter, the violins straining and then quietening. Every head turned. Olivia felt the stares like tiny, sharp needles piercing her skin. The whispers rose not like steam, but like the hissing of snakes. The pamphlet. Shameless. Penniless. My husband says the father is to be arrested in the morning, wearing that dress again. Poor thing. To show her face. The audacity. Head high, Olivia. Her mother whispered, her hand gripping Olivia's arm, with a strength that was painful. Olivia focused on a point on the far wall, a bland tapestry of a hunting scene. She put one foot in front of the other. She was walking, she fancied, to her own guillotine. Her father, his eyes glazed with laudanum and bewilderment, stumbled beside them. They were a parade of the damned. And then she saw him. He was not in a dark corner. He was not hiding. He was standing near the alcove, laughing, a glass of champagne in his hand. Lord Julian Croft. He was here. He was not in Kent. He was not in hiding. He was here in London, at the pinnacle of society, toasting his own good fortune, while she, the woman he had courted, the woman he had implicated, was being torn apart. He was with Lady Genevieve. She was looking up at him, her face a mask of adoration. As if sensing her stare, Julian looked up. Their eyes met across the ballroom. Olivia's breath hitched. 1,000 emotions warred in her chest. Betrayal, despair, and a tiny, stupid, idiotic flicker of hope. Surely he will come to me. Surely he will explain. He will make this at right. She was so lost in this desperate hope that she did not realize she had begun to walk toward him. The crowd, sensing a scene, parted, creating a path between them. She was 10 feet away when she spoke his name, a desperate, broken croak. Julian. Lord Julian's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He looked at her standing there, in her twice-mended dress, the subject of the entire room's scorn. Then he smiled, a cold, polite stranger's smile. "I am terribly sorry, madame," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "Have we been introduced?" It was not a cut. It was an annihilation. It was his public confirmation of the pamphlet. Yes, his actions screamed, "She is beneath me. She is nothing. A stranger." Lady Genevieve laughed, a high, tinkling, cruel sound that shattered the last of Olivia's composure. The faces around her began to blur. The heat of 1,000 candles pressed in on her. The whispers became a deafening roar in her ears. Her father was gone. Her mother was a ghost. Julian, her savior, was her executioner. Her vision tunneled. The floor, so solid a moment before, seemed to tilt beneath her feet. She stumbled backward, reaching out a hand for a support that wasn't there. She didn't know she was at the top of the grand marble staircase that led to the supper rooms. She only knew she was going down. Her heel caught on the edge of the velvet runner. She pitched backward, a small, desperate cry escaping her lips. The crowd gasped a collective shocked intake of air. She saw Julian's face. He had turned. He was watching. His expression was not one of concern, but of mild, detached annoyance. He didn't move. She closed her eyes, bracing for the bone-shattering impact on the marble below. It never came. She was caught. It was not a gentle catch. It was a collision. Two arms like bands of steel wrapped around her, snatching her from the air with a force that knocked the last wisp of breath from her. She was pulled hard against a chest that felt like a shield. Her eyes flew open. She was staring up into the dark, impossibly intense face of Rhys, the Duke of Ashworth. He had been in the shadows, as always, but while the entire room had watched her social execution, he had been the only one to see her physical peril. He had moved with a speed that was terrifying, crossing half the ballroom in an instant. He held her secure, his grip unyielding. The ballroom was utterly, profoundly silent. The Duke of Ashworth, the man who despised her, was holding her in his arms as if she were the most precious thing in the world. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. Then he lifted his gaze. His eyes swept over the crowd, and finally they landed on Julian Croft. Rhys's face, which had been unreadable, transformed. It was a mask of such cold, concentrated, apocalyptic fury that even Genevieve took a physical step back. Without a single word, ignoring the gasps and the stunned horror of the ton, the Duke of Ashworth adjusted his grip, lifting Olivia fully into his arms. He shouldered past the Marchioness of Salisbury herself and strode out of the ballroom, carrying the ruined Lady Olivia as if he were a king claiming his prize. The Duke of Ashworth did not stop at the door. He carried Olivia through the corridors of Salisbury House, his long, determined strides echoing in the sudden silence. He bypassed the ladies' retiring rooms, heading instead for the library, a masculine domain he knew would be empty. He kicked the door shut with his boot. The lock clicked with a sound of grim finality. He did not deposit her gently. He dropped her onto a large, leather-bound sofa. He said he didn't know me," Olivia whispered, her mind still back in the ballroom, her body shaking in delayed shock. "He knows you," Rhys snarled, his voice a low growl she had never heard. "And now he will know me." He was not pacing. He was vibrating a contained explosion of energy. He went to a decanter on a side table, splashed a measure of brandy into a glass, and returned. He didn't ask. He lifted her head with one hand and pressed the glass to her lips. "Drink." The fiery liquid burned down her throat, chasing away the cold and bringing sores to her eyes. She choked, but he didn't relent until she had swallowed. She pushed the glass away, the fog of shock finally clearing, replaced by the familiar hot rage. "You," she cried, scrambling to her feet. "You knew you let this happen. You said I was collateral. You stood by and watched." "I did," he roared, turning on her. The cold mask shattered, his eyes blazing. "And you were... Do you have any idea what it took me not to throttle him in Hyde Park? To not call him out at the opera? I had to let him hang himself with his own rope, and you..." Lady Olivia kept trying to hand him a stool. You hate him. You were competing with him. Competing," he spat the word. "Do not ever put me in the same breath as that thing. I was not competing. I was hunting." The raw, personal venom in his voice stopped her. This was not the cold, indifferent Duke. This was a man on fire. I don't understand," she whispered. He stopped, his anger seeming to deflate, replaced by a weariness that went bone deep. He ran a hand through his dark hair. "No, you don't. How could you?" He looked at her, his gaze holding hers. He has a history. His father, the old Viscount, was the same. They are predators. They prey on the weak, the desperate. They hunt." He paused, and his next words changed everything. "My aunt, my mother's sister. Her name was Alara." Olivia's hand flew to her mouth. "She was my namesake," Rhys continued, his voice going flat and cold, the voice of a man reciting a catechism of pain. "She was like you, bright, quick-witted. She fell in love with Croft's father. He did the same to her, promised marriage, invested her dowry, ruined her, and when she was penniless and pregnant, he cut her, just as his son cut you tonight. She walked into the Serpentine. I was 10 years old. I was the one who found her." The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by Olivia's sharp intake of breath. "I have spent the last 5 years," he said, his voice a blade of ice, "building a case to destroy him, his father and their entire network. I have documented every victim, every phantom ship, every ruined family. I was so close. And then," he said, looking at her, "I saw you." The pieces began to click into place, forming a new, staggering picture. "The garden?" she whispered. You knew I was there." "My man, Mr. Thorpe, the one I was speaking with, informed me of your presence before I even stepped into the ivy. I knew you were listening." "So you said those things. Irrelevant, collateral. You said them for me to hear." "Yes," he said, his voice raw. "I did. I was angry. You were not part of the plan. You were this brilliant, infuriating distraction, and you were walking straight into his trap. I thought if I was cruel enough you would hate me, yes. But you would stay away from him, that you would be safe. I thought my coldness would be a shield." "But it wasn't," she whispered. "No," he said, his fist clenching. "It was my greatest mistake. My cruelty only made his false kindness seem brighter. It pushed you toward him. I watched you ride with him, laugh with him. And every day I had to choose between your safety and my revenge. It was the most difficult thing I have ever done." The pamphlet, Croft's work, of course, his final move, designed to destroy your reputation so completely that you would have no one to turn to but him. He would then save you. He would not offer marriage. He would offer protection. A small house in St. John's Wood. You would have been his mistress, his broken toy. Olivia swayed, and this time he reached out his hand, steady on her arm. "But you caught me," she murmured. "I was always going to catch you," he said, his voice low. "I let him play his hand. I let him cut you publicly. I needed the ton to see his true character. As we speak, Mr. Thorpe is with the Bow Street runners. They are inviting Lord Julian Croft to a private room where they will present him with the evidence of his fraud, his conspiracy, and his libel. He will be on a prison ship to Australia by the end of the week. Lady Genevieve, his accomplice, will find her invitation list permanently empty. And my father, our debt. I bought your father's debt 3 weeks ago," the Duke said, as if it were a simple matter of paperwork. "The day after I saw you with him at the opera, I knew what he was. He owes me. Which means... He looked at her. He owes nothing. The library was silent, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner and the ragged sound of Olivia's breathing. The air was thick with revelation. Her mind was a whirlwind, a kaleidoscope of fractured images, Julian's charming smile twisting into a sneer, the Duke's cold disdain at the opera now revealed as a mask of raw pain, her father's panic, the bailiff's rough hands. Everything she thought she knew, every judgment she had made was wrong. The man she had painted as her villain, a cold, unfeeling monster, was the only man who had seen the truth. And the man she had pedestaled as her hero was the architect of her destruction. Rhys, the Duke of Ashworth, had turned away from her. He stood by the tall moonlit window, his back a rigid wall, his hands clasped so tightly behind him that his knuckles were white. He was giving her space, giving her time. But she could see the tension in his shoulders, the coiled energy of a man waiting for a final fatal blow. He had laid his entire complex and painful history at her feet. And now he waited. She finally found her voice, though it was a mere whisper. You protected me." He did not turn. It was not enough. All this time, she continued, her mind moving sluggishly, connecting the pieces. Every cold look, every sharp word. The way you looked through me at Almack's. It was a shield, not for you, for me. It was a failed shield, he said, his voice a low growl of self-loathing. It only pushed you toward him. You let me hate you, she said, the realization landing with the force of a physical blow. While you were saving me, you let me despise you. At this he turned. The moonlight caught his face, and the Iron Duke was gone. In his place was a man who looked exhausted, his eyes haunted by a pain that was decades old. Your hatred, Lady Olivia, was an infinitely small price to pay for your safety, he said, his voice raw. It was a price I paid every time I saw you smile at him. Every time I watched you ride out with him, I had to chain myself to my own ledgers, to keep from riding after you and pulling you from that horse. He took a step toward her. I did not account for you. My plan, it was all iron and ice, all revenge, for my aunt, for the other families he's destroyed. It was a cold, perfect mechanism. And then, you walked into the middle of it. Olivia shook her head, still trying to grasp the why. But you didn't know me. Why me? Why would you risk your entire life's work for collateral? She threw his own cruel word back at him, and she saw him flinch as if she had struck him. Because, he said, his voice dropping, I knew you before Almack's. I knew you before I even knew you were a complication. He looked away as if recalling a memory he had no right to. It was a week before your debut. I was in Hatchard's bookstore on Piccadilly. I was in a foul mood. My man of business was droning on about canal shares. And then I heard you. He paused, and his eyes found hers, a strange, soft light in them. You were arguing with Mr. Hatchard. He was trying to sell you a new translation of the Odyssey, and I heard this voice, clear as a bell, say, "But sir, this is not a translation. This is an insult." The translator has missed the heart of it. He uses the word sadness. But Homer did not mean sadness. He meant longing, a longing so deep it is a sickness. There is a profound difference. A small hysterical laugh bubbled in Olivia's throat. The terrible green bonnet. His lips quirked a ghost of a real smile. "The truly terrible green bonnet. You were incandescent," he continued, his voice losing its harsh edge. "You were all fire and passion, and truth in a city that is built on artifice. You were not a debutante. You were not Lord Harrington's daughter. You were a mind, a heart. And I, the Iron Duke, was a coward. I turned on my heel, left my man of business stammering, and fled the store." He laughed, a harsh, dry sound of self-mockery. "I ran. Because you were the single most terrifying thing I had ever seen. You were life, and I was a man who lived among shadows." He stepped closer. "And then I saw you at Almack's, and I saw him, Julian Croft, see you for the first time, and I knew he would see exactly what I saw. Not a prize, but a light, and I knew he would try to extinguish it." "So, my debate," she whispered. "Stanhope, he laughed at me." "He did not," Rhys said, his voice firm. "I said, it is a rare thing, Stanhope, to find a diamond that thinks. The ton will try to dull her." Stanhope laughed because I, the man who detests society, had just become a poet. He said, "Ashworth, my God, you're in love." And I informed him that if he ever repeated that observation, I would personally see to his financial ruin. The confession hung in the air, raw and shocking. Olivia's mind snapped back to the present, to the one remaining terrible fear. "My father," she whispered, her hands clenching. "The debt. You said you bought it. You own us. Is this just a different cage?" The fragile light in his eyes died, as if she had doused it with a bucket of ice. He looked devastated. "That," he said, his voice flat, "is what I have been reduced to in your eyes. A more competent jailer." "No, One moment," he said, holding up a hand. He strode to the massive mahogany desk, unlocked a drawer, and pulled out a thick sheaf of papers. He didn't look at them. He walked past her to the fireplace where a low fire still burned. "This," he said, holding up the papers, "is your father's debt. All his markers, all his foolish notes. This is the chain." And he dropped them into the flames. They watched together as the corners curled, turned black, and then burst into bright orange flame. The ink bubbled and disappeared. "The debt is ash," Rhys said, his voice devoid of all emotion, "as is the man who created it. You, Lady Olivia, are free. Entirely. Completely. Your father's name will be restored by morning. The story I will circulate is that he was the victim of a terrible fraud, which I, as a friend of the family, was privileged to uncover. He will be a victim, not a fool. Yuthul will be a heroine. You can go back to society." He turned to face her, his hands empty, his face a perfect cold mask. The Iron Duke was back. "Lord Bromley," he said, his voice clipped, "is still in want of a wife. I hear he is stable. I wish you a very good night, Lady Harrington." He was dismissing her. He was letting her go. He had offered her everything, her freedom, her family's name, and an escape, even from him. Olivia watched the last of the papers ignite the last of her prison. She looked at him, at this magnificent, complicated, and utterly broken man, who had just built a new wall around himself, higher and colder than ever. And she smiled. "You are not a good liar, Your Grace," she said, her voice soft. He raised an eyebrow, the mask of indifference firmly in place. "I am considered one of the finest liars in London." "No," she said, taking a step closer to him. The heat from the fire was on her back. "You just told me. You are a coward. You ran from the bookstore. And you are trying to run now." He stilled. He had no reply. He had been so sure she would take the freedom he offered, so sure she would flee from the man of shadows. And she had called his bluff. She was the one who held out her hand. She was the one who closed the distance. "You caught me when I fell, Your Grace. A literal physical fall. But I have been falling for a very long time. I was just aiming at the wrong person." She stopped directly in front of him, her hand still held out between them. "You said you hate being lost, Rhys. I too hate being lost." He stared at her hand as if it were a serpent. Then slowly, as if it cost him all his will, he looked at her face. The iron was gone. The shadows were gone. There was only Rhys. "Olivia." He breathed her name, and it was a prayer. He took her hand. His grip was not a command, not a plea. It was an anchor. "You will be the death of me," he whispered, his thumb tracing a line on her palm. "Or the life of you." She countered, her own hand gripping his tightly. "Be my Duchess," he said, his voice rough, urgent. I did not save you to have you. I did it because I could not live in a world where he had you. But now I am a selfish man. I have cleared the board, and I am asking, not as a duke, not as a creditor, as a man who is still a coward. Please, be my Duchess, not to save you, but to save me." Olivia looked up at this man of fire and iron, this man who had held the world at bay, and had, in the process, nearly lost himself. "I will not be a distraction, Your Grace," she said, her voice full of a strength she didn't know she possessed, calling back to the words that had once broken her. A true, brilliant smile transformed his face. "No," he said, his eyes blazing. "You will never be a distraction. You will be my center. My everything." "Then you must promise me something," she said, her voice suddenly serious. "Anything. Never to be so cold again. I find I prefer the fire. You, my lady," he said, pulling her hand to his lips, his dark, intense eyes never leaving hers, "have just burned down my entire fortress. I suspect I shall never be cold again." And so the Iron Duke, who the Ton thought was a man of cold stone, proved he had the warmest heart of all, reserved for the one woman who saw him. Lady Olivia Harrington learned that in a world of glittering surfaces, the truest love is often hidden in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to catch you. Theirs was not a love built on pretty words or easy smiles, but on a foundation stronger than steel. A love that had been tested by ruin, betrayal, and a fall that could have broken them both. Thank you for watching this story. If you loved the drama, the twists, and the final sweeping romance of Olivia and her Duke, please show your support. It helps us create more stories just like this. Don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with a friend, who loves a good historical romance, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell. You won't want to miss the next story we have waiting for you.